All right, it's Jodi Day.
Hey,
Nick, you scared me. I thought I was going solo.
I just got inside the door and put everything on, and Jesus Christ.
Hey, welcome, Costco parking lot romance. This is the freaking best name ever. Malcolm, Stray, Aaron, Olivia, I see you all. I thought I would take a few minutes to give you guys kind of an update on what I've been working on and what I'm thinking about doing and some stuff I've got in the pipeline before we get going on this wonderful Jodi Day. We don't have a whole lot left of day 41. If you guys recall, the last stream was day 37. And oh my God, these expert witnesses know how to drone on and drone on and drone on. This current witness, this patient zero of the Me Too movement. This is where it all came from. Words are violence. Believe all women. Men are inherently evil. And it's the subtle things that they do, like when they don't take out the trash and they expect you to do it, and all kinds of just weird nonsense. That's where this came from. This is where this started, at least publicly. This is the oldest that I've seen it go back, and this is 2013. But that being said, it drones on and on and on and on. So we skipped ahead to cross-examination with the angry little elf. And that was day 41. It took 4 days to get to cross-examination with this woman. So we're starting, we started day 41. We're going to finish up day 41 today on the Jodi Arias-Trial. But we don't have that much time left. We have, let's see here, we're at, we only have about 20 minutes, and we're going to play it at 1.25 speed like we normally do anyways. So we'll probably get into day 42 a little bit today. But I thought we'd chit-chat for a minute. Just say hi to everyone. Because every time I see them to jump on a stream every once in a while, everyone's got a ton of questions for me. And you want to take out the trash. I know, right, asshole? That's violence. That's violence if you don't take out the trash. Wait, what? Well, that's who is the most ridiculous expert you've seen qualified in your own? Oh, in my own practice as an expert. I had a DUI case where we had some issues with the data master, which is the breathalyzer that the state of Michigan uses. And I wanted to qualify my own expert and the defense on that case. And it's sort of a roundabout way of getting to the most unqualified expert was the judge said no to my expert because the arresting officer, well, he knows enough. He can tell the jury how the machine works. I'm like, no, it's not. He's had like 1 month of training 20 years ago and then just does whatever the machine tells him to do. Yeah. But he was the expert for that trial. He was the one I was allowed to call. So there you got that one. Let's see. It's almost like you're missed in the community. I know, right, Valhalla? Welcome. And I didn't want to take up all the time talking, and we'll allow Nick to talk a little bit about what he's got going on. But Nick wasn't on when I first went live. I was like, all right, I'm geared up to talk about what I'm doing. So if you guys, one thing I've been covering, if you guys don't know, I did put a little blurb in my Discord about it earlier today, is there are 8 or 9 electors from the state of Michigan that are being charged criminally with uttering and publishing and forging documents in connection with the 2020 election. And what they are saying, what the state is saying, is that because these people signed and cast votes for Donald Trump in the 2020 election, and that those certificates were sent to DC, that somehow they forged state documents, official documents, which in my opinion isn't really the case. I've done a breakdown on it in the past, but right now the preliminary examination is going on. So I've been following that closely, and I'm going to be doing a series of videos on that, as well as some of the stuff that I've been doing on Trump v. Colorado, which you might have seen a couple of my short videos out about that. Namely, you don't have a fundamental right to vote for president, and the states can say who the electors are and who they're going to vote for. That's it. So, so I've been doing some stuff, all sort of revolving around the Electoral College and that sort of stuff. So that's what I'm working on. In addition to the Zachariah Anderson documentary, I've got some more interviews lined up, and yeah, and then there's been a couple of woodworking video, or I put one out, just a boat that my son and I were restoring, and I've got some more coming out on that on my other channel, which is Great Lakes Shipwrights. So that's what I have been up to. Nicholas, what have you been up to?
Oh, working. And the Young Thug trial, that there was no trial yesterday because someone got sick. There's no trial today because, it's the CVID. Tomorrow it's a hearing, which is incredibly boring. Maybe Thursday. It will be Thursday, Friday. There will be actual trial. So today I'm going to watch the pre-hearing on Fannie Willis disqualification later today, after this.
Nice.
And because Mr. Roman's lawyer called 9 witnesses, and all of them filed motions to quash, of course. And it went interesting. And new facts regarding how the prosecution's office is run was revealed. So I'm doing that after Jodi today.
Nice.
Because in my opinion, Fannie Willis, district attorney, how she...
Is that up already? Is that stream up?
Yeah.
Up? Okay, so we can redirect to it?
Yeah. And because in my opinion, Fannie Willis is getting caught. This seems to be how she has run her office the entire time. So and also,
well, it is usually that way. Like they say about guys convicted of DUI, right? Well, it wasn't your first time driving drunk. It was the first time you got caught. And that's the way it is with most criminals and most
unethical prosecutors.
Yeah.
Will
I be jumping? I'm gonna figure out how to do the James Crumbley trial. The thing is I have 28 hours a month that I can dedicate to YouTube. That's what I've determined. 28 hours a month, and which doesn't sound like a whole lot when you kind of start breaking it up. So within that 28 hours, I'm going to figure out a way that I can do at least, I won't be streaming the whole trial, but I will at least be doing sort of summaries of the day's proceedings kind of thing. So that's what I'm going to do with James Crumbley. I might stream like the openings or something. I'm not sure yet, but I'm probably not going to stream the whole trial. Is that a padded cell? Yes. Nick and I are in a padded cell. Is this the first time you've noticed this? Look, see, we're in a padded cell. We usually have Jodi Arias in the padded cell with us, but not today. Hang on, I got to get that going. Where is it? There it is. There's Jodi with us in the padded cell. But good morning, all. Need to do a road trip to Turtle Boy territory. I ain't getting arrested.
Yeah. I'm still planning on Missouri and then do a road trip from Houston to Michigan. Do I pass through any of these states?
No.
No.
You'll pass through Valhalla territory. You'll pass through feral territory. And Sean, potentially criminal territory.
Is Indiana around there so I can go mock some?
Yeah. You can go through Mo territory. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go see some Odins. You know, if you show up though, it'd be like C3PO when he goes to the Ewoks. You know, they're gonna praise you as a god and worship you.
Yeah, those diaper Nazi couldn't find their own asses if they tried to. Yeah.
Someone filed a motion to change custody arrangement. Yeah, I know. I know. But while we're here, while I'm here doing, okay, so this is actually, so it's 40 hours a month. 40 hours a month is what I've allotted myself to stream to YouTube going forward, starting probably in March somewhere. It's not going to start this month. But 12 of those hours is taken up with Jodi. We've got 3 hours a week that we do with Jodi. So 12 hours is taken up with Jodi. And then I'm not even counting the Lego streams because those are more sporadic. But so that leaves 28 hours a month left for the rest of the stuff I do. But I think that's enough. Like this morning's video, it took me maybe half hour, 40 minutes by the time I thought of it, sat down, recorded it, edited it, put it out. Okay, so maybe a half hour, right? That's not, and I can do stuff like that. I don't know. We're playing with the format, people. Playing with the format. But shall we get going on this? I backed it up a little bit because I wanted to hear. That's what we were going to do. By the way, Nicholas and I have talked about bringing in some Jodi interviews and some other things in between. We have found lost testimony, never before seen testimony of Jodi Arias. We have found it.
Yeah. Well, they found.
I'm
just tagging along.
It's you can't hear her attorney though ask the questions. You can only hear her answers. So I've got to find a different source, or we've got to somehow make it work. I don't know if Vielhammer is in the chat. By the way, Vielhammer re-edited all this stuff, so go give him a subscribe. His channel is in the description. But he said it's going to be a ton of work to fix it. So I'm going to try to find a different source. But we have potentially never before seen testimony of Jodi Arias. And we can make up the questions. Oh.
Or we can listen to it beforehand and then Miss Aries, blah, 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 blah. And then...
that would be amazing.
We need to do that.
But we have like 20 hours of it though. That's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But I like that idea.
Yeah. But Jodi has so many answers to jury questions. We could sit our asses together with a beer, or me with a beer at least, and figure out questions. Cut back and forth. Yeah.
Definitely. It was part of a it was technically part of her sentencing, but it was a closed hearing, so the media wasn't allowed to broadcast it. However, the court still has records of it. So it was a closed hearing section of her sentencing, but she goes into a lot of details. And good afternoon, genitals.
Hey, genitals.
Ditched Baker for us.
Oh, thank you.
See, Valhalla wants in for that. Ask Jodi some questions. We could have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be really good. But in the meantime, we're going to bring you Angry Little Elf cross-examining a Me Too movement expert. And we'll see where it goes. We might get into day 42. We might not. The other thing I was going to say, I backed it up a little bit because this woman was talking about a video that she put out on YouTube, something about Snow White was abused or something. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
We found it.
You found it?
We found it. It's a TED Talk.
Yeah, it's a TED Talk. And
I didn't know if you guys wanted to listen to it after we get through today's testimony.
No, I can more or less guess what's in it.
I've not watched it at all. I have no idea what she says, but maybe we'll get into that.
2010, are you familiar with putting on a seminar and indicating that Snow White was a battered woman? Do you remember talking about that? All right. Do you remember that? Yes or no?
No, that's, if you would like to show the entire YouTube video, I would be happy for anybody to see that, because I'm not talking, the title is Snow White a battered woman because it was catchy.
Right. So it does say is Snow White a battered woman, right? That is the title of it, correct?
It is.
And in fact, you gave this presentation, if you will, in Las Vegas back in 2010, right?
I've given it more than once.
In 2010, isn't it true that you gave this presentation in Las Vegas?
I gave a short form of it.
Yes or no?
I gave a short form of it. Yes, I did.
Did I ask you whether it was a long, medium, or short form?
Well, there are different versions of it, Mr. Martinez.
I'm asking you whether or not you gave this presentation, yes or no? I'm not asking about the
I
length.
gave a presentation in Las Vegas. Yes, I did.
Isn't it true that you also gave that presentation in Los Angeles, again in 2010?
An altered version.
But you did give this presentation involving Snow White and whether or not she was a battered woman in Los Angeles, right?
Yes,
And one of the items that you used with regard to that in trying to determine whether or not an individual is a battered person, you look at 558. That's a guideline that you use, right?
I did not use that at all in any of the speaking engagements, Mr.
Well-
Martinez.
I'm not asking if you used it in the speaking engagement. In this case, for example, you talked about family of origin issues. Do you see that up there?
Yes,
And one of the things that you told us, well, you looked at the family origin of Mr. Alexander. Didn't you tell us that?
yes.
Well, if we take a look to follow up on your Snow White issue that you presented, isn't it true that she had family of origin issues, didn't she?
The family of origin issues we're talking about here, Mr. Martinez, are the family of origin issues for the perpetrator.
Okay, so in other words, in this case, you see Mr. Alexander as the perpetrator. You don't see him as the victim.
No.
And so it's,
Well, I am looking at domestic violence. And in regard to domestic violence, I am seeing Mr. Alexander as the perpetrator. Yes.
and one of the things that we know about your presentation also is that, and Snow White and the Seven
Yeah,
Dwarfs
and the
is
only
a fairy
thing
tale
she
by the
has-
Brothers Grimm, right?
To back that
Yes.
up. is
And
Miss
in it, we
Mary's
have an individual,
thing,
that's
so.
the king.
Sorry, I got it. I
Yeah.
had to pause it there. What were you saying?
No, she said that in this relationship, she sees Mr. Alexander as the perpetrator. And I just said, and the only thing she has to back that up is Jodi Arias saying so. There are no physical evidence. There's no nothing. There's not even anything in writing or in recorded phone calls. It's all Jodi Arias, what she said.
No witnesses. The only witnesses saw her angry at Travis, not the other way around.
Yeah.
She has a Karen haircut years in advance too. I know. So the TED Talk I found, by the way, was from 2018. So it was after this, but it's the same sort of story that she apparently Snow White was a battered woman.
Who is married and has a
It goes
kid,
to Lee.
and they name her Snow White, right? Yes or no?
I'm not using the Brothers Grimm version. I'm using the Walt Disney cartoon. I just want to make that clear.
So there's different, all right? But
Oh,
it is
really?
true, though, that Snow White had a father, right?
Yes, she did.
Disney might
The
have
father was the
something to
king,
say
right?
about that.
Yes,
And it ends up that Snow White's mother ends up dying, right?
yes,
And what ends up happening is that he remarries, right?
yes,
And what ends up happening when he remarries is that he has somebody who is less than honorable, if you will, or savory with regard to her view of Snow White, correct?
yes,
And so what happens during that situation is that there is a problem because this woman, the queen, begins to, if you will, abuse or be less than nice to Snow White, right?
yes,
So what we have then is a situation where we have a father who has failed to protect, right? If we're looking at it from this global perspective, right?
yes,
And so then if we look at it that way, Snow White is sort of being, and I use the term loosely, abused, not in the technical sense, but she's not being treated correctly, right?
she's being abused as a child, right?
That's correct. And one of the things that happens after that is that the father sends her away, correct? She goes into the forest, right?
That's actually irrelevant, going this far into the Snow White story.
Right?
She goes into the woods, correct?
And in fact, when she's out in the woods, there's neglect by the father, right?
Yes,
So, for example, in this particular case, one of the things that you used in your evaluation was that the defendant, according to you, suffered some abuse as a kid, right?
yes,
According to you, the
Hey,
wicked
Betty.
stepmother in her circumstance is her mother, right?
I didn't say that.
No, I'm the one that's asking the question. Isn't that true?
I don't equate her mother with a wicked stepmother.
Well, her mother, according to what you found out, hit her with a spoon, right?
Right,
And according to what we know is she allowed her father to hit her also, right?
yes, she
And
did.
her father hit her, and at one point, you know, some of this. What do you know about what her father did to her in terms of any abuse that there may be here?
There was one incident where he pushed her and she hit a piece of furniture and lost consciousness.
And the mother was present, right?
According to
I'm not certain if the mother was present.
Wouldn't
Mr.
that be
Martinez.
important to know?
Was there a poison apple involved?
Not necessarily, because there were other incidents.
Pardon?
There were other
I'm
I'm not evaluating whether or not Miss Arias is a battered child, Mr. Martinez. I was looking at the issues of domestic violence.
Well, ma'am, you're talking about abuse, aren't you?
I'm
Right.
talking about domestic violence between two adult intimates.
And one of the things that you just told me that you did was that you looked at the background of the defendant. Didn't you just tell me that?
I did,
And you know about this abuse at the hands of her mother, right?
yes.
And one of the things that happens, and we talk about Snow White being sent out in the forest, one of the things that happens to the defendant, you're aware,
course it's
is that
serious.
according to what you know, isn't it true that before that she was the age of majority, she was, if you will, also sent out into the woods to go live with somebody else, right?
She was not sent out. She chose to leave.
So she left. In other words, she chose to leave. Why? Why do you believe that she chose to leave?
Objection, relevant speculation. Very tough.
Objection. It's a fairy tale. What is this line of examination? This is awesome.
Go ahead. Why did she choose to leave?
She chose to leave because she felt abused and because she felt controlled.
By her parents, right?
Yes,
And she moved in with somebody by the name of, what? What was his name?
Bobby Wattis.
And she lived in what can be best described as less than ideal circumstances, right?
Correct.
And the same thing with Snow White, right? She lived in a situation with less than ideal circumstances, right?
She lived with the seven dwarfs, and according to the Disney version, she was pretty happy.
Well, she lived in a shack, right?
Why
I thought it was a
any
cute
of
little
this
cottage, Mr.
relevant?
All right. But there's seven dwarfs that she's living with, right? No one of her own age is there, right?
Using the Disney version of Snow White, not the Brothers Grimm version. This is like that shrink who who's evaluated Johnny Depp through his movies. This is
Yeah, I
equally
watched-
stupid.
I watched Pirates, so I know Johnny
Yeah.
Depp. Well,
I'm basing my stories of Disney's version of Snow White. Oh, so you're a moron. I mean,
oh my God. We are missing so many emojis and overlays. I didn't know it was going this in depth. Oh, okay.
that's a great pause. Take away the captions and screen grab that.
All right. Let me grab this.
Where is it? 40413.
I got it.
Yeah.
There we go. We're gonna put a poison apple in her hand.
Yeah, I mean hand up and put Oh,
I don't know
Chat-
the age of the dwarfs.
Well,
I don't. I'm
what
sorry, but I don't.
What I'm saying to you is it your opinion that there were other little kids that would play in the playground with her when she was living with the seven dwarfs?
Oh my God.
Objection, relevant. Argumentative.
Overruled. You may continue.
Overruled.
the question,
This is
please?
all
Is it
relevant.
your understanding that there were other little kids to play with Snow White
In the-
out near the shack?
Near the cottage? No.
In fact, she was just there cooking and cleaning, right?
Well, she was talking to the birds and singing with the animals.
And cooking and cleaning for the dwarfs, right?
Correct.
Isn't that sort of what you know about the defendant and Bobby Juarez, right? Do
I don't know that Jodi Arias was cooking and cleaning for Bobby Wattis.
you know if he was working? Do
He was not working.
you know who was providing the money to buy the food?
They were living with his family.
Right, but do you know whether or not the defendant was working?
She was working.
You know whether or not she indicated on the stand that she was the one that bought all the food?
I've not been privy to what she said on the stand, Mr. Martinez.
Did you discuss it with her?
That she bought food and
Sure.
brought food into the house? Yes, she did.
And then with regard to Snow White, one of the things that we know is that something bad happens to her, right? The incident with the apple, right?
Yes,
Somebody comes and harms her, right?
yes.
And we can take it different ways, but do you know any incident involving her and Bobby Juarez?
Yes.
What is the incident that you know about?
I know about a time that he choked her. I know that he, according to Mr. McCartney, verbally abused her.
So with regard to the choking, that's a violent act, correct?
Correct,
Just like this issue involving the apple is a violent act, right?
correct.
And with regard to Snow White, we know that she ends up going unconscious, as we would talk about it in this day and age, right?
Correct.
And basically what's going on with her is that she's waiting around, right? For Prince Charming, right? Or somebody, right?
Is it Prince Charming?
She's waiting around
Well, she's not going anywhere, right?
when she's unconscious?
Right,
Well, when she's unconscious, she's lying around unconscious.
right. And then we have the kiss or whatever happens and Snow White awakens, right?
Correct.
Is that
That's
Sleeping
not
Beauty?
relevant.
With
Oh no, that's
Prince Charming, right?
Yes.
And if we
But
start talking
the
about
Brothers
this issue
Grimm
involving the
version
balance
had-
of power,
yeah, that's slightly more, in the Brothers Grimm version, he is taking advantage of her, and while she is unconscious, she becomes pregnant. So there's a
Oh,
slight,
that's right.
yeah. So there's a slight difference between the Disney version and the Brothers Grimm version. That's why I don't understand, why is she using the
Snow
Disney
White.
version when the Brothers Grimm version is so much darker?
I kind of want to watch the Brothers Grimm version now. They need to make that movie.
that particular situation, Snow White has no power, right?
Objection, relevant.
Overruled.
Right?
Well, she's a queen. I'm not sure what kind of power she has.
The king has the power, doesn't he?
I imagine this is going to be the expert for Sarah Boone too.
Relevance, foundation, speculation.
Overruled.
Right?
Well, the king, yes, has more power.
Right. And so if, for example, Snow White, in this relationship, if we're talking about the balance of power, in that case, she doesn't have much power, right?
Objection, speculation, Judge, may we approach?
You may approach.
Brothers Grimm Snow White. Do we have a movie? It doesn't look like we have a movie version of it. We have books.
You may not be looking at the right. Red Tube might have a version.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. We're not going to go there right now.
No.
Right now, we're going to save that for after we read the book. Then we'll watch the movie, the Red Tube version of the movie.
Yeah.
May continue.
Based on your understanding, ma'am, who had the power in that relationship, the king or the queen?
In the specific cartoon of Snow White,
I'm talking about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which you have used on 2 separate occasions.
Mr. Martinez, you're mischaracterizing my presentation. I don't do my presentation the way you're characterizing it.
Ma'am, isn't it true that there's a syllabus that indicates, for example, that from 11:10 to 12:10 in Studio 3, Alice Laviolette presented a presentation titled, "Is Snow White a Battered Woman?" Would that be true?
That's the title. It was a catchy title.
So is that yes? That would be true then, right?
It was a catchy title, yes.
So yes, I am reading it correctly, right?
You're reading the title correctly. You're not reading the
This
content
is where this
correctly.
expert bases all of her opinions. Snow
What
White.
this shows us
The Disney
is that with
version.
your approach and with Exhibit 558, even if no one's alive, even if it's a myth, even if it's all made up, you can still come to the opinion.
Wait till he finishes the question. Finish your question.
Isn't it true that you can still come to the opinion that the person in this fantastical world is a victim of domestic violence?
That is incorrect.
Well,
That was not what I said in my speech.
and
I have said repeatedly that it is a catchy title, and I used it. But what I do in the speech is to talk about gender and power, and I talk about gender. Mr. Martinez, I'm not talking about Snow White actually being a battered woman. I use, well, you'd have to see the speech and you'd have to see the content,
let's
Mr.
put
Martinez.
aside your presentation. Now we put aside your presentation. Isn't it true that using your continuum of aggression and abuse, and by reading this myth, we can plug in and go through this and make an assessment that Snow White was a victim or was a battered woman? We can do that, can't we?
No, we cannot. We absolutely
Hold on.
cannot.
There's an objection. Ms. Lamont,
That's mischaracterization of the continuum. You called it a myth.
I think you misinterpreted the question. Restate your question.
Isn't it true, ma'am, that if we take a look at this continuum of aggression and abuse, which is Exhibit 558, if we use that and we refer to something that's wholly a myth, using your expertise, we can make a determination, for example, that Snow White was a battered woman, can't we?
No, we cannot.
Well, then let's talk a little bit about Snow White and whether or not we have some of these issues that are presented here.
We're
in your
talking,
exhibit. Yes or no?
that's,
Can we do that? Yes, can we do that? Could you do that with me?
you're mischaracterizing it, Mr. Martinez. Overruled.
I would like to go through it with you. And what you told us is that these columns are not necessarily explicit, right?
That is specific to adult relationship, adult intimate partner relationship, Mr. Martinez. And I have no information about the relationship between Prince Charming and Snow White. I don't know what their relationship was, so you're mischaracterizing that by saying that that can be applied to Snow White as a child. This is not about child abuse.
Well, let's talk about, for example, whether or not we can find some of the items that were present in the Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, and whether or not Snow White was a battered woman, okay? With regard to the conference agenda, that conference agenda that we're talking about, it dealt with adults, didn't it?
It dealt with adults.
Yes, it did. And in it, you said, is Snow White a battered woman? That was the title, right?
Objection, ask and answer.
Sustained.
And that being the case, ma'am, now you're trying to tell me that, well, no. I don't want to talk about Snow White now because it involved a child, right?
No, that's not what I said, Mr.
Well,
Martinez.
then,
Do you want me to answer that, Mr. Martinez?
yes, I
I
want you
can.
to answer me why it is now that you don't want to talk about Snow White as an adult when you did talk about Snow White as an adult when you made the presentation back in 2010.
I talked about Snow White in regard to growing up and what we believe about ourselves as men and women growing up. I did not talk about Snow White in an intimate relationship with the prince.
Hey, porcelain.
What did you say at the end there? In an intimate relationship where?
With the prince or the king or whoever.
My question was a little bit more narrow than that. And my question was that in this presentation, this involved adults that you were talking about, right?
I spoke to adults.
Nobody
And it
had Snow
involved
White when
adult
they're being
abuse,
born.
didn't it?
Yeah,
It
no
involved
one
gender.
did.
We were talking about gender and expectation about gender. And it was in a domestic violence conference. So I spoke about it in a domestic violence conference.
Right, and it involved adults, right?
It involved what we learn as children and bring into adulthood.
So it involved what you learn as children and what now?
And what we can bring into adulthood about what we learn as children.
Right, and so for example, if we have anger as an issue in the family, that's something that we can learn as a child and take into adulthood, which is what you told us about Mr. Alexander, right?
Correct.
And so we can talk about a number of things that are here and use this as a guide, can't we? To determine whether or not an individual is a victim of abuse, right?
I'm confused. Are you talking about Snow White again? Because I'm not sure where you're going here.
I'm talking still about.
I'm not understanding this.
I'm talking about Snow White, Exhibit 558.
That is not applicable to Snow White and the prince's relationship, which is the relationship that this is about adult intimate partner violence. And you keep referring to Snow White as a child. And what I'm saying to you is that that's about adult intimate partner violence and not about her relationship with the prince, which I know nothing about after they get married.
So what you're saying is, though, even though this involved adults, and you did say that Snow White a battered woman, which would imply that she was involved with a man as an adult, right? You're saying that disregard that now, right? Because it doesn't mean what it says, right?
Objection, Ms. Harris, this is the testimony.
All right, we're going to take the recess at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, Monday, 9:30 a.m. Please remember the admonition. Are there any questions?
It's a
Have a nice weekend. You are
gigantic
excused.
courtroom. Okay, so Snow White's been brought into the Jodi Arias trial. Ridiculous nonsense.
Oh, yeah, I don't know where he, besides discrediting her, but he already did that, so I'm not sure how this is necessary. But
Yeah, I
that's been his, that's been him taking 3 days for something that should take 2 hours.
Well, that's always been the case for this
Hmm.
guy. All right. Let's see.
Please raise your hand. I see no
She's
responses.
questioning the jury.
Mr. Martinez, you
Did
may
any
continue
of
with
you watch Snow
cross-examination.
White
Man,
over the weekend?
Thursday, we were talking.
This is the next morning.
Monday morning. So
Oh yeah, this is Monday morning. That was Friday night. So now we're on to day 42. Let's see where this goes. See if he had a chance to sleep on his Snow White inquiry.
About your approach to an assessment in this kind of case. And one of the things that you told me was that with regard to 558, that was not a roadmap, but it was a guide that you used in your evaluations, correct?
Yes,
Additionally, with regard to your evaluations, sometimes you do interviews, correct?
correct,
And those are called the clinical aspect of the evaluation, correct?
correct.
And in addition, in this case, you did 44 hours of interviews, correct?
Yes, I did.
And additionally, you look at other materials such as written documents, correct?
Yes,
And you review those and then you make your assessment, right?
I do.
One of the things that we were talking about on Thursdays was that even though that is the process that we follow, there's no requirement, if you will, that in this process, that there actually be an interview with anybody, right?
I'm not sure.
Well, you're the one that put together this continuum, right?
Yes, but I'm not sure how you're.
Yes or no,
applying it.
ma'am?
No, I don't understand your question,
Judge-
Mr. Martinez. I don't understand what you're asking.
Is it too fast?
With regard to 558, isn't it true that when we started your testimony in this case, we started talking about 558? Do you remember that?
Is it too fast? Or are we good? I'm good with it. As long as
yeah, I'm
everyone
good,
else is.
but it's up to the chat if they can.
they could follow along.
Hmm.
All right, let us know.
I used that to define domestic violence. Yes,
Yes
I
or
did.
no?
I defined domestic violence. Yes, I did.
Ma'am, I'm just asking you whether or not the sheet of paper, you see the sheet of paper 558?
I do indeed.
Whether or not this was used as part, this sheet of paper was used as part of your presentation at the very beginning of direct examination when Ms. Wilmot was questioning you, yes or no?
It was used, yes.
And when you finished your cross-examination or your direct examination on Thursday, isn't it also true that this document was used when you were talking about whether or not the defendant was abused, correct?
On Thursday,
Yes. Do you remember back to Thursday, ma'am?
I do remember
Do
Thursday.
you remember that Ms. Wilmot was asking you questions for most of the day?
Yes, I do.
And for a shorter portion, there was a cross-examination, right?
Yes, there was.
At the very end, do you remember that Ms. Wilmot was using this with regard to your opinion of abuse in this case? Do you remember that?
Yes, she was using it as part.
Yes. So the answer is yes, correct?
Yes, in part.
So you do use it with regard to your assessment in cases.
Am I the only one that finds it ironic that the elf brought up dwarves? Well, you know, he gravitates towards that. You know, anytime he hears something about little people.
Of
Were you gonna say something?
where the issue is whether or not there's any abuse, correct?
I don't really use any specific thing. I use that as a guideline, and I don't use it to apply specifically to each case. I use it as a template in describing what domestic violence looks like, Mr. Martinez, and a range of domestic violence. That's how I use it. And I use it in training.
And you used it in this case, right?
I did not use it in regard to Ms. Arias, if that's what you're asking me. I'm not
No.
sure.
No, I asked you whether or not you used it in this case in the sense that you walked into this court. Do you remember taking an oath and sitting up there early on the first day of these proceedings?
Yes,
And during the early part of those proceedings, this exhibit, this continuum of aggression and abuse was used, wasn't it?
it was used as an
Yes or no?
explanation. It was used as an
Ma'am, Judge, would
explanation.
you instruct the witness to answer this?
Ms. LaViola, can you answer yes or no?
It doesn't feel complete, Your Honor, to answer just yes or no.
All right, Mr. Martinez.
All right then, ma'am. Isn't it true that when you first testified, exhibit 558, and Ms. Wilmot was asking you questions, it was placed underneath this machine here and it was broadcast for everybody to see it in the courtroom? Yes or no?
That's true.
And at the very end, isn't it true that this guide, this template, whatever it is, isn't it true that that was used during the questioning by Ms. Wilmot at the end of your direct examination in this courtroom? Yes or no?
Yes, it was.
But you're saying you didn't use it for any purpose in this case, right? That's what you're saying now.
I'm not saying that, Mr. Martinez. I'm saying I don't use it as exclusively as a diagnostic tool at all. I use it in training and to look at interventions in particular, but it also gives a more complete, and this is why it was used here, a more complete definition of domestic violence and the range of behaviors, and also looking at aggression that happens in otherwise healthy families that don't have patterns of domestic violence.
Are you done?
Yes, I am.
Did you use it in this case? Yes or no?
Objection is to the vagueness. Which aspect?
Sustained.
Did you use it in this case as part of your presentation to the jury?
Yes, I did.
Did you use it in this
That's
case
been
as part of
answered.
your
That's been
assessment
answered.
of the defendant?
Not in particular.
Well, then why were we even talking about this, exhibit 558, if it doesn't even apply to this case then, ma'am?
It does apply to the case.
Well, let me do it this way. If you said you didn't use it with regard to your assessment of the defendant, then what do we even need to look at this if you didn't use it?
I use it to look at the range of domestic violence. So in that way, I looked at it. I'm not someone who just lumps a diagnosis. And as I was very clear about,
Yes,
this is
Dave
a
is
range,
very
it's
new to
continuum.
this
So I use it in that way.
so give him a warm welcome. And he's recently retired, but he will make sporadic appearances.
I come back for Jodi. you
Yeah.
know. We can't leave Jodi behind.
Mm.
Hey, Sea Souter, re-upped because I believe you were already a member, right? You have to have been a member. But welcome back. Welcome back.
Yeah.
And for anyone who is a new member, there is a link to my Discord on my member page. And my Discord is where most of my member content is, except for the occasional stream that Nick hosts for me.
Yep. And for you who don't know, me and Dave is having a friendly competition. Most likes, most super chats, most gifted memberships.
That's right.
So, and
I'm winning on 2 out of the 3 right now.
yeah. And the third is a draw because none of us have a super chat yet.
That's
And
right.
you all have 20 minutes to tell me you love me.
There you go.
Framework that I think about. It's something that I use to look at what's happening in a relationship. So in that way, yes, Mr. Martinez, I used it.
So nothing in this 558 applies in this case. Is that what you're saying?
No, you mischaracterized what I just
No,
said.
I'm asking you yes or no. Are you telling me, yes or no, that nothing in Exhibit 558 applies as part of your assessment in this case?
I think I just answered that question,
Is that
Mr.
yes or no?
Martinez. I said that there is a range of behavior and I use that to look at this case.
So what is on this document then was used by you in this case as it applied to the defendant, correct?
To a certain degree.
So if we want to talk about the defendant's case and we want to talk about how it is that you reach your assessment, by necessity, we can refer to Exhibit 558, right?
In a limited way, sure.
So that's a yes, correct?
Objection is favored.
Overruled.
Is that yes or no?
You can.
And in this case, you also went through a number of answers to the questions, and you talked about the first column, and you also talked to the column to the end, didn't you?
I talked about all the columns.
Yes,
Yes,
you talked about every one of them in this presentation when you testified, correct?
yes, I did.
And then one of the things that we talked about that in the context of whether or not Snow White was a battered woman, right? That's how it started, right?
I think we spent a lot of time talking.
Is that
about
yes or no?
That is, yes, we
It's
spent
okay,
a
I
lot of
gotta
time
count
talking
down.
about that.
Did I ask you if we spent a lot of time on it?
I'm just trying to give you a more
Ma'am,
effective answer.
Judge, would you please ask it?
Ms. LaViolet, listen carefully to the question and try to answer the question you are being asked.
Okay,
Did we discuss this in connection with whether or not Snow White was a battered woman? Do you remember that?
yes,
And with regard to that, in fact, you spoke about that back in Los Angeles in 2010. That's what your CV shows us, right?
yes,
And in fact, that was a keynote address back in 2010, right?
yes,
And so if you being the keynote speaker there, you discussed issues involving whether or not this applied in connection with Snow White, right?
no, I did not.
So, but you did deliver this keynote speech back in 2010, right?
It had nothing to do with this particular.
All right. It
container.
had nothing to do with this particular aspect, but it did have to do with whether or not Snow White was a battered woman, right?
I think I said that that was a catchy title, and I used the catchy title.
Right, but it was in connection to that catchy title, right? The present, where you were the keynote speaker, right? Man, actually, that's not true, is it?
What's not true?
Isn't it true that you did not deliver the keynote speech back in 2010 involving whether or not Snow White was a battered woman?
Well, you gave me.
Yes or
the-
no? Yes or no?
No, I don't know. I don't have my CV with me.
You just walked her into a trap. You gave the keynote speech about Snow White being a battered woman, didn't you? Yes. But it's true that you weren't the keynote speaker, right? So she's just randomly answering questions and she has no clue what she's saying. That was a nice trap. I like that.
So I gave several keynote addresses, and if you are trying to trick me with a year, you can trick me with a year.
This issue discussed.
I mean,
Right.
if you will allow me
Ms.
to.
LaViolet, hold on for a moment. Mr. Martinez asked another question.
Ma'am, I want you to take a look at an exhibit, which is part of your CV. Okay?
All right.
In my Discord, by the way, is one of her TED Talks on Snow White being a battered woman. So that's
Let's take a look at it and see if this is not page 3 of 34 of your CV. This is exhibit 596. Recognize it?
Yes,
And that is a true and accurate copy of that particular page, correct?
yes. Well, it's, yeah, part of it's of that page.
If I may have it back.
Fine.
596.
Oh,
It's her CV where
There's
they
no
get.
objection unless the entire CD comes in. Approach this.
Oh, okay.
is
Sidebar.
I'm going to present just part of a CV, as in, okay.
He wants to just impeach her on part of the CV, and defense counsel has said, "Well, then all of it's going to be admitted."
Yeah,
Rule
but
of completeness.
she's already been proffered as an expert witness. Can he really go to her CV?
Well, if he wants to impeach her, he can use anything to impeach her.
No. Okay.
But I don't think her CV was admitted. So
At the bottom, it talks about Los Angeles, California, ICAN conference with Snow White, a battered woman, correct?
Correct.
Now, let me show you a copy of the syllabus of that particular conference.
I was thinking the same thing too, Malcolm. He's kind of like waddling around,
Mm.
very Joe Pesci or Daffy Duck style.
Yeah, and I mean the syllabus doesn't really mean anything because that's like reading in the back of a book. It just gives you a rundown that may or may not be actually correct.
But it didn't say that she was the keynote speaker. How dare
Yeah.
she not put that down and then testify differently?
At page 3.
Yes,
It does reference this article, was Snow White a battered woman, right?
yes,
And it was presented by ICANN, wasn't it?
yes, it was.
And it was presented in Los Angeles, right?
Correct.
And this is the syllabus that went with it, right?
That's not
Class
a,
schedule.
that's just a schedule. There's no syllabus
Okay,
there.
this was the schedule, okay. I move for the admission of exhibit 597.
Isn't syllabi No, that's plural, right? Yeah, that's plural. Because you don't say syllabuses. How do we know when a plural form ends in an I as opposed to an is? Like if you have several justices Thomas, how do you say that?
The keynote speaker, right?
I was in Las Vegas.
I'm not asking about Las Vegas, I'm asking about Los Angeles, ma'am. Isn't it true that you were not the keynote speaker?
It was considered a keynote. There were considered keynote panels, and I was
Judge,
on
would you
one.
instruct the witness to answer, please?
He is answering.
Overruled. You may continue.
I was asked to do, there were keynote breakouts, and I was a keynote breakout speaker. And it wasn't the person who was the plenary, no, but it was considered a keynote breakout.
Ma'am, the keynote speaker actually was somebody by the name of Catherine S. Connell, correct?
Yes,
And you were just part of Studio 3, where people came by to listen to you in the breakout seminars, correct?
it was considered a keynote breakout, Mr. Martinez. That's why it's listed in keynote.
In your exhibit number 596,
That's actually
say keynote
good
breakout
point he's
addresses?
having there, because she wasn't the keynote speaker. She is one of the sideshows.
Yeah,
On
but
the
she was a
seminar.
keynote of the sideshow, so she was a keynote then.
Yeah.
What the hell is a keynote speaker? What's the definition of a keynote speaker? And why does this
Well,
matter? Except that he's trying to get her
It's a main stage performer, so to speak. And for instance, you're on a festival. You have the main stage, and then you have the side stage, where other local bands, and minor bands.
Yeah, but keynote is the prevailing tone or central theme. So if she's speaking on the central theme, then she would be a keynote speaker,
Okay.
right?
Oh.
I can make that argument.
No, it
He
doesn't.
just likes
so
to
this
pick
only
apart
talks
little
about keynote
things.
addresses, right?
I guess. I put keynote breakouts. I didn't,
Ma'am, with regard to keynote, you're the one that put this exhibit together, yes or no?
yes.
Your CV is something that you control what goes into it, right?
Keynote breakouts are
Ma'am,
listed
Judge
with
is not answering
keynotes.
it.
Overruled. Continue your response.
Keynote breakouts are listed with keynotes. Because they're listed in the program as keynote breakouts. So that's why I listed as a keynote. I'm not trying to misrepresent myself, Mr. Martinez, if that's what you're implying. That's not what I'm doing.
Then I move for the admission of 597. based on the title.
No. All right, 597 is admitted.
It's Tuesday. Why does no one tell me these things? Well, you know, just you got to stay on top of it yourself.
Let's take a look at this. We're looking at page number 2. Well, let's do page number 1. It does talk about ICAN, correct?
Yes,
And if we take a look at it down here, it does say ICAN, correct?
correct.
Then this indicates on page 3 that from 9:30 to 11, there was a keynote speaker, right?
Right.
And the person who delivered that keynote address was somebody by the name of Catherine S. Connell,
Yeah, but a
correct?
keynote address.
Your name's
doesn't
not
mean-
on there, correct?
Correct.
And then you said, well, I delivered the keynote speech in the plenary section. That's what you said, right?
No, I didn't. I was the keynote in a breakout session, in a studio session. It's called.
All right. And if we then take a
What's
look at the
going on?
breakout seminars, does it say keynote speaker in the breakout?
No,
It just says that you're the person that's presenting that in this studio number 3, correct?
that's the way it was. You're implying that I think that I'm lying about what I do, and I don't lie about what I do, Mr. Martinez.
Ma'am, I'm not implying. I'm indicating that you're misrepresenting what you indicated here in exhibit number 596.
I was told.
Ma'am, let me finish my question, please.
Sure.
I'm not implying anything. I'm indicating that you misrepresented the fact that you were the keynote speaker with regard to this, was Snow White a battered woman? Because
This is why these cross-examinations and these directs take so long, is these people get fixated on the smallest of little things. Do we really think the jury cares?
He's having a bicycle stand discussion. And bicycle stand, I don't know if you have that expression.
Oh, no.
In big projects, in counties, somebody will always get a hang up of where to put the bicycle stands. And that could take up
Oh.
hours and hours of time, even though it's about, do we place it there or there?
Oh, yeah,
that-
no, that's exactly what's going on. This is like
Yeah.
the little,
Yeah,
This
that's the
is-
bicycle stand. Yeah.
yeah, this is when like Larry
Because-
David is all
yeah,
fascinated about what the contents of the minibar for his new hotel and
Yeah.
not really worried about, you know, does it have rooms or locking doors?
Yeah.
Okay.
597 indicates otherwise, doesn't it? And 597 is this one. Yes or no?
The,
Objection, Council President.
Restate your question.
Is the portion of the CD that we're talking about, which is 596, is it accurate when it indicates that in Los Angeles, California, in 2010, you were the keynote speaker involving this, was Snow White a battered woman? Yes or no?
I was a keynote breakout, according to Deanne Tilton, who was the director of ICANN, Mr. Martinez.
I'm not asking about anybody else. I'm just asking whether or not you believe that this says that you were the keynote speaker at a breakout session.
A keynote. It doesn't say that.
I
No,
wonder
it
if
does
she's
not say that.
testified
Ma'am, and
since this.
one of the things that you seem to indicate was that you really don't need to use Exhibit 558 when you're reaching your assessment, right?
It's a frame of mind.
I understand it's a frame of mind. I'm not asking about that anymore. I'm asking about whether or not you told me previously that you really don't need to use what's in Exhibit 558 when reaching an assessment in a case such as this.
I think that you misrepresent what I say, Mr. Martinez. I think in a global term, because I have read other people's work and my work, and I think in those terms, but do I put down a piece of paper and assess that way? No, probably not, but it's up here after all these years.
Well, ma'am, what you're indicating is that you do use it, except that it's in your head. Is that what you're saying?
I use it in part.
And it's in your head.
You know, what's her name? What's the woman's name that's running against Trump right now in the primaries? I can't remember her name. She had, so apparently Trump is like installing people in the Republican leadership. And she had a comment that was hilarious. She said it's like he's rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. And that was the most amazing. That was the greatest thing I've ever heard. Not ever heard. The greatest thing I've heard in this political. Haley, there it is, Nikki Haley. Yeah, she said Trump's rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. It is so true. It's so true. It's awesome.
Some things are just plain funny. Whether you like Trump or not, some things are just funny.
But that's what Juan is doing here. He's rearranging chairs on the deck, and it's literally meaningless. It doesn't matter at all. I wonder, did the jury ever give any press statements in this case?
I don't think
really
so.
want to know what they were thinking.
I must say I haven't really searched for it, but to my knowledge, no.
I've been searching a lot of interviews. So I've got some interviews of Juan. I got some interviews of her. I've got some Jodi interviews. I've got a bunch of stuff that I've been sort of stacking up with. But I haven't found any jury interviews yet.
Is that what you said? That's what you just said right now, right?
Well, it's in my head and it's on a piece of paper.
And with regard to this particular piece of paper, when, or this continuum, or whatever it is, did you or did you not use it in making assessment in this case?
Objection, SVP.
Overruled. Did I use it at all? Did I use it because of my head? Because of what's in my head?
Did you use it? That's my question.
I used my way of thinking, which includes that.
And so if we take a look at Exhibit 558, it would reflect what's in your head, is what you're telling us, correct?
It would reflect part of what's in my head.
And nowhere in, and you didn't write a report in this case, correct?
No.
You spent 44 hours, you reviewed a number of written documents, but you didn't put anything in writing, correct?
No, I did not.
And in your approach, nowhere are you required, for example, to talk to anybody in reaching an assessment, are you? You're not restricted in that fashion, are you?
I'm not sure. Required by whom?
By your approach. Your approach does not require you to talk to anybody or conduct any interviews in making an assessment as to whether or not there was any abuse, right?
I was limited in what I could look at.
I'm not asking you if you were limited, man. I'm asking you whether or not this approach that we've been talking about, the one that you told us in the courtroom over these days, isn't it true that that approach does not require you to talk to anybody or interview anybody before you reach your conclusion?
That's not how I work.
I'm not asking you if that's how you work. Well, you say that's not how you work, right? That's what you just said, right?
That's not how I generally work. I generally do interviews.
Well, with regard to, for example, Chaitanya Lay, do you remember that you gave us an opinion about what you thought about Chaitanya Lay and Mr. Alexander? Do you
Yes, I
remember saying
did.
that?
Yes,
You
I did.
didn't talk to Chaitanya Lay as part of your opinion about what was going on between her and Mr. Alexander, did you?
No, I read what they wrote.
Right. So what I'm saying is you're not required under your approach to talk to anybody before you give us an opinion, right?
Two things, not necessarily my approach, and secondly, what I am given that I am able to review that I find credible.
So there's a reason why an expert witness might not write a written report. And that's because once they write a written report, they can be cross-examined on that written report if their testimony differs from it. If they write a written report, it has to be turned over to the other side. If they don't write a written report, then the other side doesn't necessarily know what the testimony is going to be about either. And there's no requirement that they write a written report ahead of time. Just if they do, they have to turn it over to the other side, and that can be used to impeach them. So I might not necessarily have a expert write a written report, just because, like if I have like an expert that's giving an estimate as the cost of damages or something to something, that's different. But for this kind of thing, you don't necessarily want one.
No, because she's rendering opinions about a non-science area.
Well, yeah, I mean it's all fairy tales and hopes and dreams, right? So, so we don't want her to be cross-examined on that.
I'm going to jump off a little early because I will be starting my other stream in a few minutes.
And yes, and we will all be, whether you're watching on my stream or Nicholas's, redirected over there.
Yay!
Yay!
We are watching the pre-hearing for the hearing about Fannie Willis being disqualified. And yeah, it's a boring title, but it is much more interesting. I promise. I promise. But
you got to get that clickbait going. Talk about Snow White and the dwarves that raped her, and then you're good to go.
Yep. But it's an appearance by Santa Claus, who's saying ho ho ho.
All right. We got about 4 more minutes, and then I'll be sending you guys all over there. So see you in a bit, Nick.
Yep. See you in a bit.
I'm not asking about that. You're willing to come into court like you did last Thursday in the morning and part of the afternoon and give an opinion about a relationship involving people such as Mr. Alexander and Shatanya Lay without talking to Shatanya Lay and without talking to Travis Alexander, correct?
I looked at far more than that, Mr. Martinez.
I'm not asking you what you looked at. I'm asking you whether or not you rendered an opinion in this courtroom about Shatanya Lee and Travis Alexander's relationship without talking to either of them. That's all I'm asking.
I did not speak to either of them.
But you did give us an opinion, didn't you?
On
whatever you gave us an opinion. You did give us an opinion, didn't you?
I gave an opinion within a context, Mr. Martinez, and I think that's important.
Whether it's looking at context or not looking at context, what you did is you read something and then you said, this is what I believe. That's what you told us, right?
What I believed based on a context, Mr. Martinez.
Right. And that context did not involve talking to either of the parties to that conversation, right?
That's true.
And in fact, though, you were able to tell us
Wait a
the
minute.
view with regard to Shatanya.
I don't know if they were text or IMs. I get them mixed up, but it was written material.
Sorry, I had to confirm whether or not this is a $3 super sticker for Nick. That means Nick wins the super chats. Thank you for letting Nick win the super chats.
That would involve conversation between Mr. Alexander and Shatanya Lay.
What date?
What date?
Yeah, yes.
There was a range of dates, but
Right.
if you would refresh, I've reviewed thousands of documents. So what can I say the document that you're referring to?
No, you were the one that referred to this opinion on Thursday, weren't you, ma'am?
There's objection made. What opinion?
Sustain.
Ma'am, you told us that Shatanya Lay was vulnerable. Didn't you tell us that on Thursday as it involved her relationship with Mr. Alexander? Do you remember telling us that?
Yes.
With regard to that opinion, in terms of their relationship, whatever the relationship may have been between her and Mr. Alexander, when was that she was vulnerable? Give me a date.
Mr. Martinez, there were a range of IMs. And if you're asking me to be a history major, I'm not a history major, but I read thousands of documents. And if you can refresh my recollection, I would be happy to tell you the dates.
But you, as you said,
So she can't identify when Miss Arias became a victim, as she indicated that she was. All right, we're gonna leave it there. Thanks again, everyone, for joining Nick and I on Jodi. I'm gonna get Jodi off the screen here. For those of you who are new, every Tuesday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Swedish time and noon Eastern, Nick and I dual stream Jodi Arias. And we are on day 41 of, I think, like 50 some days, 60 days, something like that. But some of them are shorter. I can't remember how many days there are in this trial. But we're almost done. And then we got some interviews we're going to go over. And then we're also 56 days. And then we're hoping to get some of our own interviews going as well. We miss you. I'll see you soon. Oh, yes. Legos this Saturday. Thank you, Valhalla. This Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Solomon Anderson, Zach Anderson's brother, will be joining Valhalla, myself, and Wendy H. for a Lego stream. And if you don't know those, you're missing out. This is where Valhalla and myself and Wendy H. interview various YouTubers and other personalities while at the same time having a couple of drinks, building some Legos, talking law and life. And it's a good time. It's a good show. And we got Solomon this Saturday. Then on March 2nd, we have Sean, potentially criminal. And then on March 27th, I want to say, I think it's the 27th, we have Megan Fox and plenty more people lined up coming forward. So those will be once or twice a month on Saturdays to be scheduled when we can get our guests scheduled. Stray, thank you very much for the super chat. How about a tie? That works perfectly. All right, so Nick and I are tied on that. I win the likes and he wins the membership, so it's an overall tie. No. Yep, we're good. Okay, cool. It is a tie. That will be fun. Yeah, we also have some other guests in the works coming up. And we don't have anybody locked down yet, so I'm not going to say any other names. But those are the next 3 guests coming up. Solomon on this Saturday, Sean, potentially criminal, on March 2nd, and then March 27th, we have Megan Fox. So stay tuned for those. We will post those streams up shortly. And remember, every Saturday and every Tuesday at noon Eastern, it is Jodi time. Everyone, have a good day.
State of Arizona versus Jodi Arias, verdict, count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action upon our oaths, do find the defendant as to count 1, first-degree murder.